The Galactic Council's meeting room was filled with tension. The Council, made up of the most important species from across the galaxy, had gathered for an urgent meeting. A dangerous threat was approaching, something the galaxy had never faced before. Kravos, a ruthless alien warlord, had set his sights on a small and seemingly unimportant planet, Earth. Some Council members knew about Earth, even though it was a young and isolated planet. Humans had only recently started making contact with other space civilizations, but their abilities were already noticed. Despite their short time in space, humans had shown they could adapt and survive. The Council knew that if Kravos attacked Earth, it could cause chaos throughout the galaxy. Warlord Kravos was not easy to deal with. He ruled with force, leading an army of brutal warriors who only wanted to conquer. The Council had managed to talk with him before, but this time they were afraid that talking wouldn't work. In a quiet voice, Chancellor Lena, an experienced diplomat, spoke to the group. Humans are different from other species. We need to act before Kravos makes a huge mistake. His arrogance could lead to his defeat. The Council agreed. A group would be sent to Kravos' home world to warn him not to attack Earth. They hoped he would listen, but many feared he would just ignore their warning. The delegation was quickly chosen. It was a mix of diplomats and military advisors who had dealt with Kravos before. Leading them was Chancellor Drax, a veteran of many negotiations. He knew how to handle the galaxy's tricky politics, but even he felt uneasy as they prepared to leave. This mission was risky, and Drax had a bad feeling about it. Kravos had won many recent battles, making him more confident. His empire now stretched across more star systems than ever. He had become unpredictable, and his hunger for power seemed endless. As the group arrived at Kravos' huge fortress, they knew they were walking into real danger. The fortress towered over the capital city, dominating the skyline. When the delegation arrived, they were greeted by a squad of heavily armed soldiers. Their faces were hidden behind thick helmets, and their weapons gleamed with advanced alien technology. The message was clear. Kravos was preparing for war. Inside the fortress, the delegation was led through halls filled with trophies from the worlds Kravos had conquered. Banners from fallen empires hung on the walls, along with weapons and strange alien artifacts. It was a harsh reminder of what Kravos was capable of. At last, they reached the throne room, a vast chamber where Kravos sat on a huge throne made from the bones of an extinct species. The warlord was an intimidating figure, towering over the delegation. His black armor, scarred from countless battles, seemed to absorb all the light around him. His cold, yellow eyes locked onto Drax as he entered the room. "You're here to beg for peace again, Chancellor." Kravos' voice echoed through the chamber, full of contempt. Drax stepped forward, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Warlord Kravos, we aren't here to beg. We're here to warn you. Earth may be a young planet, but it is not a target you should pursue. The humans are strong, unpredictable, and their world could disrupt the balance of power in the galaxy." Kravos scoffed, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Humans? I've heard of them. A primitive species, barely able to travel in space. You insult me by suggesting they're a threat." "They're not like the others you've conquered," Drax said, holding Kravos' gaze. "They are adaptable and resourceful. They've overcome challenges that would have destroyed others. They have the power to surprise even the strongest enemies." The warlord leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "I've crushed every species that has dared to stand against me. Earth will be no different." Drax knew that words alone wouldn't change Kravos' mind. "You might succeed in attacking Earth," Drax said, "but it will cost you more than you realize. The humans have allies, some even within this council, and they won't sit quietly while you threaten their world." Kravos laughed, his voice echoing through the room. "Allies? You mean the council? A group of weak politicians who have only delayed the inevitable. You're all afraid. Kravos sneered. "You're all afraid. Afraid of the power I have and afraid of the truth that no species in this galaxy can stop me." Drax stood firm. "The Council does not fear you, Kravos. We simply want to prevent unnecessary destruction. This is your final warning. Leave Earth alone or face the consequences." The warlord rose from his throne, towering over the delegation, casting a long shadow. "I don't take warnings from cowards. Earth will fall just like all the others. You are dismissed." Drax and the delegation bowed and left the throne room, their mission a failure. As they walked out of the fortress, Drax knew the galaxy was now on the edge of war. Kravos wasn't going to listen. He would attack Earth, and when he did, the consequences would be disastrous, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. As their ship left the warlord's capital, Drax sent a message to the Council. "Kravos will not change his mind. Prepare for the worst." The news of Kravos' coming invasion reached the Galactic Council quickly. Many feared the worst, but some still held on to hope that humanity wouldn't fall as easily as Kravos believed. After all, Earth had a history of beating the odds. Though the human race was behind in technology compared to most spacefaring civilizations, they had one advantage: their creativity. Throughout their history, humans had always found ways to overcome obstacles that seemed impossible. They were survivors, driven by a relentless will to adapt and thrive, even in the hardest of times. In Earth's military command center, high-ranking officials rushed to figure out the situation. Satellite images showed a massive fleet gathering at the edge of the solar system. The size and power of Kravos' forces were beyond anything humanity had ever faced. General Alice Munro, one of Earth's top strategists, was leading the defense efforts. "We faced impossible odds before," she said to her team. "We survived our own global wars, we survived ecological disasters, and we rebuilt after every crisis. This will be no different. We're going to show them what humanity is made of." Munro knew that brute force alone wouldn't win this fight. Kravos' empire had both the numbers and the technology. Instead, they would have to rely on Earth's greatest strength, its creativity. General Munro had a plan. She knew that Kravos and his forces underestimated humans, especially their creativity and unpredictability. As the invasion fleet approached, the people of Earth came together like never before. Scientists, engineers, and soldiers worked day and night, preparing defenses, developing new strategies, and building weapons designed to surprise the invaders. As the alien fleet drew closer, the world watched. But instead of fear, there was determination. "We've come too far to be conquered," Munro said. "If Kravos thinks this will be easy, he's in for the fight of his life." When the first of Kravos' ships entered Earth's atmosphere, humanity was ready. They stood strong, their determination unshaken. It was time to show the galaxy that Earth was not to be messed with. The sky darkened as Kravos' fleet covered the major cities, casting huge shadows. Massive alien ships hovered in the atmosphere, larger than anything humans had ever seen. His forces were relentless, sending waves of fighters and troops to key locations around the world. But Earth wasn't caught off guard. General Munro stood in the central command bunker, surrounded by holographic maps of the battlefield. Every move Kravos' forces made was tracked in real time. His strategy was clear: overwhelm and conquer by force. But Munro had other plans. "All units, initiate Phase 1, she ordered. Across the globe, Earth's military launched a coordinated defense. Orbital platforms fired powerful railguns and EMPs, targeting the heart of Kravos' fleet. Ships that had seemed unbeatable were suddenly disabled, with some smaller ones exploding. Humanity's first strike had caught Kravos off guard. "They didn't expect us to fight back this hard," Munro muttered. On the ground, the battle was just as intense. Kravos' elite warriors, massive figures in advanced armor, landed in major cities, expecting to crush human resistance easily. But instead of panic, they were met with a mix of guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and unconventional warfare. In New York, makeshift barricades lined the streets as soldiers and civilians worked together to fight back, using whatever they had, including homemade explosives. Drones and cyber attacks targeted the invaders, taking advantage of weak spots in their otherwise superior technology. What Kravos had dismissed as a primitive species now fought with a level of skill and creativity that made his forces stumble. "They may have the tech, but they don't know how to fight like us," said Captain Marcus Rice to his squad as they launched another ambush, taking down an enemy patrol in the ruins of downtown Los Angeles. Meanwhile, deep underground, Monroe's secret weapon was being prepared. Humanity's brightest minds had been working on something that could change the course of the battle. It wasn't just about brute force or strategy. They had developed something new. "Activate the neural disruptor," Monroe commanded. A series of towers, hidden in plain sight around the planet, powered up. These devices emitted a low-frequency pulse that targeted the nervous systems of Kravos soldiers. It scrambled their communication and coordination, throwing the once feared invaders into chaos. Kravos ground forces quickly became disorganized as they struggled to communicate with each other. Panic spread among them as they realized they were isolated and vulnerable. In many places, human soldiers pushed them back and regained control of key locations. The disruption wasn't just affecting the ground forces. Up in space, Kravos command ships, cut off from their troops, struggled to maintain control. The carefully planned invasion began to fall apart. Inside his flagship, Kravos watched the chaos unfold. His yellow eyes narrowed in fury. This was not the easy victory he had expected. The humans were fighting back with a strength and cleverness he hadn't anticipated. "Impossible," he growled. "How can they be this resilient?" His advisors stood in silence, unsure of what to say. Kravos had built his entire empire on the belief that no species could withstand his overwhelming force. But now, he was facing something far more dangerous, a species that refused to give up. On the ground, General Monroe watched as the tide of battle turned in humanity's favor. But she knew it wasn't over yet. Kravos himself hadn't made his move. "He hasn't made his move yet," General Monroe said to her staff. "He's watching and waiting. We need to force him to act." Her mind raced as she came up with the next phase of the plan. Kravos' strength came from his ability to command his forces with ruthless precision. If they could push him into acting personally, they might have a chance to expose his weaknesses. "We're going to take the fight to him," she decided. "Prepare the strike teams. Target his flagship." As humanity regrouped and the invaders started to weaken, a bold plan began to take shape. Special Forces teams, equipped with the latest experimental technology, were sent on a dangerous mission. Their goal: infiltrate Kravos' command ship, disable the control center, and end the invasion. In the dead of night, using stealth technology and advanced suits, the strike teams boarded small, fast ships and launched toward the massive alien ship floating above Earth. The mission was risky, and many might not return, but if they succeeded, they could stop Kravos' entire war effort. As they approached the flagship, anti-aircraft fire lit up the sky. The pilots skillfully dodged the blasts, weaving through the chaos until they reached a landing bay on the underside of the ship. "Brace for landing," the pilot called out as they touched down. Captain Rice led the strike team out of the craft, weapons ready. Their mission was clear: reach the command center and disable Kravos' control of his forces. But as they moved through the alien corridors, they faced heavy resistance. Kravos' elite guards, huge and heavily armored, blocked their way at every turn. The humans fought back fiercely, using hit-and-run tactics to weaken the enemy. Firing his pulse rifle at an approaching alien, Reyes barked into his comms, "We need to move faster." Kravos is going to figure this out. In the command center, Kravos watched the battle unfold, his patience running thin. "Prepare my personal guard," he ordered, standing from his throne. "If the humans want to face me directly, I'll meet them." Kravos readied himself to join the fight. Back on Earth, General Monroe received updates on the strike team's progress. She knew the final battle was near. Kravos would make his move soon, and humanity would be ready. One thing was certain: no matter how this battle ended, the galaxy would never underestimate Earth again. The Galactic Council watched from afar, observing as Earth defied all odds. The tension in the council chambers was thick. Some species whispered in amazement, others in fear. Earth, once seen as a small and unimportant planet, was now the center of galactic attention. Kravos' invasion was faltering, and the council faced a decision whether to step in or let the conflict play out. Kensper Vetrax, who had initially argued for diplomacy, now watched the battle on the screens with both awe and concern. "This cannot be allowed to escalate further," he muttered. "If the humans defeat Kravos, his empire will collapse, and the chaos will spread across the galaxy." But for now, all attention was on Earth, particularly on the strike team that had infiltrated Kravos' flagship. Captain Ray and his team were deep inside the alien ship, moving silently through the metallic halls. The air was thick with tension. They had already faced heavy resistance, and each battle had left them worn down. But their mission was still clear: disable Kravos' command center and end the invasion. Ray glanced at his comms. "Monroe, we're approaching the central core. How's the battle going?" Monroe's voice crackled back. "We're holding them off, but your window is closing. Kravos' personal guards are coming to intercept you. You need to take him out now." Ray clenched his jaw. "Copy that. We're going in." The team pressed forward, reaching a massive door that led to the command center. Ray signaled for the charges to be set, and moments later, the door blasted open, revealing Kravos' throne room. The throne room was huge, with high ceilings and walls covered in trophies from Kravos' many conquests. At the far end of the room stood Kravos himself, an imposing figure even from a distance. His dark armor gleamed, and his eyes burned with contempt as he watched the humans enter. Kravos' deep voice echoed across the room. "So, you are the ones responsible for this rebellion. I admire your bravery, but it won't save your world." Ray stepped forward, his weapon aimed at the warlord. "You underestimate us, Kravos." "We're not here to save ourselves," Ray said, his voice steady. "We're here to end you." Kravos sneered. "You think you can defeat me in my own throne room? I've crushed empires far bigger than yours. You're nothing but insects under my feet." With a quick motion, Kravos drew a massive energy blade from his side, the weapon crackling with power. His elite guards stood ready, their weapons aimed at Ray and his team. Ray's team quickly spread out, taking cover behind pillars and statues. The final battle was about to begin. On the surface, the battle between Earth's forces and Kravos' invasion fleet had reached its peak. General Monroe watched the holographic displays, her hands clenched behind her back. Kravos' forces were faltering, but Earth's defenses were stretched to their limits. Cities were burning, and the skies were filled with fire and smoke. Yet, despite the destruction, humanity was holding strong. The neural disruptor continued to wreak havoc on Kravos' forces, and Earth's armies had gained the upper hand in key locations. But Monroe knew that without the strike team's success, it would all be for nothing. "Ray," Monroe said over the comms, "we're counting on you. Kravos has to fall, or this war isn't over." Back in the throne room, the battle was intense. Ray and his team moved with precision, firing at Kravos guards while dodging the warlord's powerful strikes. Kravos was like a force of nature, his energy blade slicing through the air with deadly accuracy. Ray rolled to the side just as the blade crashed down where he had been standing moments before. Kravos' strength was overwhelming, but Ray noticed something. Kravos was getting frustrated. For the first time in centuries, his invincibility was being tested, and it showed in his increasingly reckless attacks. "We need to break his focus," Ray shouted to his team. One of his soldiers, a demolitions expert named Jensen, threw an experimental explosive toward Kravos' feet. The device exploded in a flash of light and sound, disorienting the warlord for a moment. "Now," Ray yelled. The team unleashed a barrage of fire, targeting Kravos' armor at its weak spots. The warlord staggered, his once impenetrable defense now weakened. But even wounded, Kravos was far from defeated. With a roar of fury, he charged at Ray, swinging his blade in a wide arc. Ray barely managed to dodge the strike. Feeling the heat of the weapon as it passed just inches from his face. "Is this all your species has to offer?" Kravos sneered. "Pathetic." Ray gritted his teeth. "We're not done yet." With a final desperate move, Ray activated a hidden feature in his suit, a high-frequency pulse generator designed to disrupt energy-based weapons. The pulse rippled through the room, and Kravos' energy blade flickered and then died, the energy field around it collapsing. Kravos stared at his now useless weapon in disbelief. "That's your mistake," Ray said, stepping forward. "You thought we'd fight on your terms." With one final shot, Ray aimed at Kravos' chest, hitting him squarely in his exposed armor. The blast sent Kravos stumbling backward, crashing into his throne with a deep roar. On the surface, General Monroe received the signal she had been waiting for. "Kravos is down." "Ray, you did it," she said, her voice filled with relief. "Now get out of there." As Ray and his team made their escape, the Galactic Council watched in stunned silence. Kravos, the warlord who had terrorized countless worlds, had been defeated, not by overwhelming force, but by the resilience and ingenuity of a species they had once dismissed. Councillor Vetrax stood before the assembly. "Let this be a lesson to all of us. Humanity is not to be underestimated. They have shown a strength that few could have imagined." With Kravos' death, his empire began to fall apart. Without their leader, the once coordinated invasion crumbled, and Earth's forces quickly took advantage, driving the remaining invaders off the planet. Humanity had not only survived, they had emerged victorious. As the smoke cleared and the fires died down, the people of Earth began to rebuild. They have faced the greatest threat in their history and won, but they knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy now knew of Earth's strength, and humanity, no longer isolated, had earned its place among the stars. The skies above Earth slowly cleared as the last of Kravos' forces retreated beyond the atmosphere. On the surface, people came out of their shelters to see the alien fleet leaving, and for the first time in days, there was silence. The battle was over. General Monroe stood atop a makeshift command post, looking out over one of Earth's largest cities. The landscape was scarred, but the planet had endured. Monroe stood on the makeshift command post, looking over the city. The land around her was damaged, but still standing. She allowed herself a rare moment to reflect, watching as the fires in the distance began to fade. Despite the destruction, Earth had endured. A communications officer approached her. "General, you have an incoming message from the Galactic Council." Monroe nodded. "Patch it through." The holographic image of Councillor Vrax appeared before her. His face showed a mix of respect and awe. "General Monroe," he began, his voice carrying a weight Monroe rarely heard from alien diplomats. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I extend our deepest respect for what your people have achieved. Few believed Earth could stand against Kravos, but you have proven us all wrong." Monroe crossed her arms, still guarded. "We didn't do this for the Council's approval. We did it to survive." Vrax nodded. "Understandable, but you should know that this victory will have far-reaching consequences." Kravos' empire is in chaos, and the power vacuum he leaves behind will affect many parts of the galaxy. Some will see you not just as survivors, but as potential allies or even threats. Monroe stayed silent, thinking over his words. Vrax continued. The Council wishes to formally invite Earth into a new era of diplomacy. Your species has earned its place among the stars, and we believe that with your creativity and resilience, you could become a valuable member of the galactic community. Monroe didn't respond right away. The thought of Earth suddenly becoming a key player in galactic politics was overwhelming, especially after such destruction. But she knew it was inevitable. Earth could no longer remain in isolation. We'll need time to recover, Monroe finally said, but we'll consider the Council's offer. Vrax inclined his head. We will wait for your decision. Until then, know that the Council supports you in rebuilding. With that, the hologram flickered out, leaving Monroe alone once again. She sighed and turned to face the ruins of the city. Earth had won the battle, but the war for its future was just beginning. Elsewhere on Earth, in the capital city, Captain Ray and his team were being hailed as heroes. The media had already begun broadcasting their faces across the globe, telling the story of how a single strike team had infiltrated Kravos' flagship and brought down the warlord. Captain Ray sat in a quiet corner of the military barracks, lost in thought. He wasn't thinking about the glory or recognition as the story of his team's success spread. Instead, his mind kept replaying the final moments of the battle with Kravos, the warlord's sneer, the heavy swing of his blade. The fact that they had succeeded still felt unreal. Hey, a familiar voice broke through his thoughts. It was Jensen, the demolitions expert who had helped disable Kravos' guards. You all right? Ray nodded slowly. Yeah, just processing it all. Jensen sat down next to him, placing his helmet on the table. We took down the biggest warlord in the galaxy, Ray. That's something most people will never understand. Yeah, Ray replied. But what happens next? Kravos is gone, but his empire is still out there. There will be other threats. Jensen shrugged. Maybe, but after what we pulled off, I think the galaxy will think twice before messing with us again. Ray smirked. Let's hope you're right. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council's chambers, the aftermath of Kravos' defeat was the topic of heated debate. Representatives from different species argued about what the power shift meant for the galaxy. Without Kravos to unite them, his warlords will tear apart his empire. One chancellor argued, the chaos could spread to our borders. We need to stabilize the region before that happens. Another chancellor countered, we should start with Earth. Their people have shown strength, but they're vulnerable now. We must offer them protection. Vrax listened calmly, though his mind was already focused on the bigger picture. He knew that Kravos' death was just the beginning. The galaxy had changed, and Earth's rise as a new power was a crucial turning point. It wouldn't be long before other factions took notice. Vrax also knew that not all of them would be as eager for diplomacy as the Council. As the debate continued around him, Vrax made a decision. He would personally oversee diplomatic efforts with Earth. The humans had proven themselves, but they would need guidance to navigate the complex web of galactic politics. More than that, Vrax sensed that humanity's role in the galaxy was just beginning. They were unpredictable, resourceful, and most importantly, united in a way few other species were. If nurtured properly, they could become one of the galaxy's greatest assets. If mishandled, humanity could become an even greater threat than Kravos ever was. On Earth, the reconstruction had already begun. Cities were being rebuilt, and the scars of the invasion were slowly starting to heal. But the memory of the battle would not fade easily. Across the planet, monuments were put up to honor those who had fought and fallen. Humanity had come together in a way it never had before, and there was a new sense of unity that went beyond borders and politics. General Monroe stood at one of these monuments, watching as people gathered to pay their respects. She had never been one for ceremonies, but this felt different. It wasn't just a victory celebration. It was a reminder of what they had survived and who they had become. As Monroe walked away from the gathering, her thoughts turned to the future. Earth had won the battle, but now came the challenge of securing its place in the galaxy. Monroe knew they couldn't do it alone. They would need allies, and they would need to adapt quickly to the realities of galactic politics. But if there was one thing Monroe had learned from this war, it was that humanity was capable of far more than anyone had ever imagined. As the stars began to shine in the evening sky, Monroe couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. Earth had survived its greatest test, and now it was time for humanity to rise even higher. Weeks passed since the fall of Kravos, and Earth continued to heal. The scars of war remained, both on the landscape and in the hearts of its people, but reconstruction moved forward quickly, driven by a united planet and a new alliance with the Galactic Council. The message was clear: Earth was no longer isolated. However, beyond Earth's atmosphere, the galaxy was watching. Kravos' vast empire had splintered, and his former warlords were now fighting for power. The power vacuum he left behind was dangerous, and the instability threatened to ignite conflicts that could spiral out of control. In the midst of this uncertainty, the Galactic Council moved swiftly to stabilize the region. Chancellor Vrax, now Earth's main diplomatic contact, made frequent visits to the planet. He worked closely with General Monroe and key world leaders, making sure that humanity's integration into the larger galaxy went smoothly and that Earth had a voice in this new order. "We must prepare for what's coming next," Vrax said during a strategic meeting with Monroe and her advisors. "Kravos may be gone, but his warlords are scattered. Some will seek alliances, while others will seek revenge." Monroe stood by the large window of the newly rebuilt command center, looking out over the capital's skyline. The city still bore the scars of battle, but there was a clear sense of resilience. She turned to Vrax, her gaze sharp. "What do you suggest?" "We need to secure Earth's new position," Vrax replied. "The Council sees great potential in your people, but to truly solidify your place, you'll need allies beyond the Council. There are factions out there, species who feared what Kravos represented. They will look to Earth for leadership." Monroe nodded. "We can't let this chance slip by. Earth's survival isn't just about defense anymore. It's about making sure we're never in that vulnerable position again." In the months that followed, humanity began taking its first careful steps onto the galactic stage. Earth's diplomats, scientists, and military leaders traveled to distant worlds, forming alliances and establishing trade routes. The creativity and ingenuity that had helped them defeat Kravos now became their strongest diplomatic tools. Earth's unique perspectives and unconventional strategies fascinated many alien species, opening doors to cooperation. But not everyone welcomed humanity with open arms. Some saw Earth's rise as a threat, fearing that the same unpredictability that had allowed them to defeat Kravos could make them dangerous. Among Kravos' scattered warlords, whispers of revenge grew louder. In the depths of space, on the ruins of Kravos' former strongholds, a new leader was emerging. One of Kravos' most ruthless generals, Dren, had started to unite the remaining warlords under his banner. He had no intention of letting Earth's victory go unchallenged. On a barren planet, far from any trade routes, Dren gathered with the other warlords in a dark chamber. He was a towering figure, his armor scarred from many battles, and his red eyes burned with rage. He had been loyal to Kravos, and his master's defeat at the hands of humans filled him with fury. "We will strike back," Dren growled, slamming his fist on the table. "Kravos' death must be avenged. Earth will pay for its arrogance." The warlords murmured in agreement, but there was hesitation in their eyes. Dren could see the fear in the eyes of the other warlords. They were afraid of Earth, afraid of the unknown tactics that had brought down their leader. "We underestimated them once," one of the warlords said cautiously. "The humans aren't like the other species we've conquered. Their unpredictability makes them dangerous." Dren sneered. "That's why we won't face them head-on. We'll strike where they're weakest. Earth is still rebuilding, still finding its place in the galaxy. We'll exploit their vulnerabilities, and when the time is right, we'll crush them." The plan was set. Dren's forces would stay in the shadows, carrying out sabotage and destabilizing Earth's alliances. He knew that while Earth was strong, its new position in the galaxy was fragile. If he could weaken their unity and undermine their alliances, it would pave the way for a final devastating strike. Back on Earth, intelligence reports about Dren's movements started coming in. General Monroe and Captain Ray, now Earth's most celebrated heroes, were called upon once again to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. "We've beaten Kravos," Monroe said during a briefing with Ray and top military officials. "But Dren is different. He won't make the same mistakes. He'll come at us from the shadows." Ray, who had led the strike team that took down Kravos, nodded. "We need to take the fight to him. We can't wait for him to strike first." Monroe agreed. This isn't just about defense anymore. If we're going to secure Earth's future, we need to eliminate the threat before it grows. A new strategy was developed. Earth's forces, along with their allies from the Galactic Council, would track down Dren's hidden bases. It was a race against time. Dren was already stirring up discord among Earth's new allies, and the longer he stayed free, the more dangerous he became. The operation was swift and decisive. With the help of advanced reconnaissance technology from their allies, Earth's forces pinpointed Dren's main stronghold deep within an asteroid field. Captain Ray once again led the assault, his team at the forefront of the mission. The battle that followed was fierce, but Earth's forces had become much stronger since their first encounter with Kravos. Their technology had advanced, their tactics had evolved, and most importantly, their resolve had never been greater. Dren, defiant until the end, prepared to face them. Dren faced Ray in a final brutal duel, but just like Kravos before him, Dren fell. His ambitions were crushed under the weight of Earth's determination. With Dren's defeat, the last remnant of Kravos' empire collapsed. The galaxy, once dominated by fear of the warlord and his brutal rule, began to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Earth's role in ending that reign of terror was undeniable. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council formally recognized Earth as a central power in the new order. Humanity, once isolated and technologically behind, had proven its worth, not just as survivors, but as leaders. General Monroe, Captain Ray, and their teams were celebrated across the galaxy. But for them, this victory wasn't about glory. It was about making sure that Earth would never again face such a devastating threat. In a ceremony on Earth, beneath the same skies that had once been filled with enemy ships, Monroe addressed the planet and their allies. "We've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of," she said. "We've shown that when we stand together, there's nothing we can't overcome.